The Eagles are 12-2. Rube, how you doing?
Doing well. It's funny. I was watching. I was kind of watching the Sixers and both Monday night games. It was a lot, but Sixers got a nice win. And they during halftime they're talking about the weekend, and they're like, and the Eagles have won 10 in a row. I'm like, oh my god, the Eagles have won. They haven't lost a game since September. And you sometimes we're so close. You kind of like we know they've won 10 games, and we in a row. We keep talking about it, but then you hear somebody like national or outside Philly mention it in like reverence, and it's like, oh my god, they're really, really good.
Yeah, 10 in a row is really impressive. Every week, every Tuesday at the NovaCare Complex, I take the previous week's game book and I write W or L on it and I stack it up. A lot of W's in a row.
Why do you do that?
Because I might be a little insane when it comes to organization at times.
I would agree with that.
All right. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan. He's Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. A lot to talk about. We'll get into, we talked to Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore and Michael Clay on Tuesday. So we have some takeaways from the coordinators, a ton of questions. That email inbox has been flooded with questions. A little daunting when I get in there after a game and see like 50 to 70 emails, but sorted through some of them, have some ready to go.
Love getting them.
Do love them. And normally we wait for the end, but this is where I'll tell you guys, if you enjoy the podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you watch on YouTube, please click the like button, subscribe there as well. It doesn't help us, I don't think, but keep sending us the Spotify Wraps. Those are cool to see. We appreciate all the love.
Yeah, we do.
Let's start off with that. But we're actually going to start today with, we've been doing it now for about a month, maybe a month and a half, our top 10 power rankings in the NFL. And spoiler alert, there's a reason we're going to lead with that today. I think the Eagles are the best team in the NFL.
I think it's clearly, between the Eagles and Bills now at this point. It's hard to discount the Chiefs because they just keep winning. But like when you're looking at, I think you take into account how a team wins and what they have. Like Detroit, they're still 12-2, but the injuries, I kind of factor that in when I'm doing this. And they're decimated. They are really in bad shape. They lose like 2 or 3 guys every game. So I take all that into account. I have the Bills number one. I was kind of going back and forth, Bills or Eagles, and I saw a stat that in the last 3 games, the Bills have 17 touchdowns, no turnovers, and have allowed no sacks. And you look at
they're a tremendous offensive team.
Tremendous offensive team. And you just look at the teams that they've beaten. They're getting a lot of shootouts, but I just give them a slight edge. Obviously, the Eagles are better defensively.
I think it's very clear the Eagles are the most balanced team in the NFL right now.
That's fair. Yeah. They're very good on both sides. I went Bills number 1, Eagles number 2.
Yeah, I disagree with that because I think the Bills are obviously what they're doing offensively is incredible.
30 points 8 weeks in a row.
It's great.
Only the 5th time that's ever happened.
But they have to do that. If you're looking at the Eagles, the one big question we had after the Panthers game was, can this team have an effective passing game when it needs to? They answered that question on Sunday against a good defensive team in the Pittsburgh Steelers. So to me, that was like the last big question I had about the Eagles. Now, things can happen. Obviously, injuries can happen. We've seen that with the Detroit Lions. And you never know, any given Sunday and all that stuff. But I think the Eagles can beat you in multiple ways, whereas the Bills, right now, they need to win these shootouts.
Yeah, they beat the Niners 35-10. They beat the Chiefs 30-21. They beat the Colts 30-20. Seahawks 31-10. Titans 34-10.
Yeah, but the last 2 weeks, they've won 44-42 and then 48-42.
Yeah, and that's 2 weeks. I still think they're a good defense. They've gotten in some shootouts. And the Rams and Lions can certainly do that. A couple quarterbacks can get you in a shootout. But their defense has been pretty good most of the year. So I don't think it's a great offensive team with a bad defense. I think it's a great offensive team with a defense that's gotten gashed the last 2 weeks.
But if we're going to take into account their incredible offensive stats over the last few weeks, then I think we need to look at their defensive stats.
I agree. I agree. I think if the Bills offense and Eagles defense is a push, then compare the Bills defense to the Eagles offense and who would have the edge there. It's very close, but I
would give the Eagles that edge.
Okay. Well,
you wouldn't.
I'd probably go Bills.
So
But
you would take the Bills defense over the Eagles offense?
yeah, I mean, Eagles offense has not been particularly explosive. They've obviously run the ball well. I mean, let me see here.
Now, they obviously wouldn't have to play until the Super Bowl, so it's not even like how they match up. It's just
Sure.
who's better. These are power rankings.
Yeah. Scored 30 points once in their last 5 games. I mean, look, they're really good, and their potential is incredible on offense. They've just been a little up and down. And Sunday was a good day, and they could have scored a lot more than 27 points. Obviously, they could have punched in at the end. And I'm certainly not being critical of the Eagles. I mean, I got them as the number 2 team, very close.
They scored 27 points, but also like they turned the ball over twice. They didn't score at the end when they could have.
Well, once was on special teams, not on the offense, but
it still took away possession.
Yeah, true. I mean, I think they're clearly the 2 best teams. That 8 straight weeks with 30 points or more. I mean, that's incredible. But the Eagles have won 10 straight, so it's almost a push. I just have the Bills just barely ahead.
Okay. I have the Eagles pretty firmly number 1.
Okay.
Yeah. I look at it from a balanced perspective. And sometimes it is important to take a step back because like you see it every week. Take a step back and look, and they've won 10 games. And I know that like early, like that the Browns game wasn't as pretty, but since then, I mean, the formula for the most part has been run the football, play great defense. I mean, obviously that would be an incredible Super Bowl if it was Eagles Bills. I mean, that would be a really fun game.
Sean McDermott against the team that fired him.
Yeah.
They'd have to beat the coach who fired him probably to get to the team that fired him. The Bills finished with the Patriots, Jets, and Patriots. So, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to be looking at 14-3.
Mm-hmm. Pretty good chance the Eagles are going to be 15-2.
Yeah.
I
agree.
So if they need to be.
If they need to be. 2 really good, really dangerous teams. That would be a fun Super Bowl. I'd much rather have that than Eagles Chiefs again.
I don't know if New Orleans is already a party town, but you're going to put Eagles fans and Bills fans in that city for a week?
It'd be fun.
That'd be a lot.
Yeah, that would be fun. Bills fans are crazy. They might be the closest thing to Eagles fans. I mean, they're jumping off onto tables and stuff.
You see that guy riding that bike into that Christmas tree out here, though?
That's probably a push.
Yeah.
Remember when we did a podcast driving out of Orchard Park?
I think we did it driving up there, didn't we?
We did both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we did both. We did a podcast on the way up, and then we did a podcast in the car on the way back. We probably shouldn't brag about it in case there's any Orchard Park.
Is that illegal?
Law enforcement.
Distracted driving, I guess?
Well, there were times I had the mic and I was driving.
I was driving, though. I wasn't distracted. I wasn't listening.
I drove up, and I think you drove back.
Okay.
But it's a great atmosphere up there, just like here. That'd be tremendous. Tremendous matchup. The top 2 individual players, probably 1 and 2 in the MVP race against each other. 2 quarterbacks that have a lot in common, I think. So that'd be fun. I don't get ahead of ourselves, but it's not that far-fetched.
No, it isn't. And like during the last month and a half, 2 months, I think that the Eagles have proven themselves to be, if not the best team in the league, damn close to it. And I don't think it's crazy to start talking about New Orleans. Now, they can't do that. They have to focus on each game and be that boring team that Nick Sirianni wants them to be. But the rest of us can look at it. The rest of us can kind of look at the NFC and see how it's stacking up and see that even like the Eagles need help to get that 1 seed. They would need losses from the Lions and the Vikings. The Vikings won again on Monday night. So it's like there's still a chance the Eagles go 15-2 and don't get the number 1 seed in the NFC. But even if they're the 2, like I still feel pretty good that they're one of the teams that can come out of the conference.
Let me ask you this. Who scares you the most in the NFC?
I think it's still the Lions.
Even with the injuries?
Even with the injuries, it's still the Lions. I'll be honest, I have the Vikings ahead of the Packers. To me, the Packers are the scarier team.
Yeah.
Because we've seen that quarterback get hot last year into the playoffs, and I think they have like a higher ceiling. Now, I know they have, their record is 10-4.
10-4.
But the losses they have are good losses, like to good teams.
Eagles, Vikings, Lions, and someone. Who I will tell you. but they're dangerous. And I think I'd always rather play the team I haven't played yet.
Lions twice.
Yeah. So, I mean, they don't have a bad loss. Eagles don't have any losses, but yeah, I think the Packers scare me more than the Vikings.
Mm-hmm. And right now I have, like, we can get into the rest of our top 10s. I have the Vikings ahead of them. I think they've earned that.
Yeah.
But if you're asking me which team scares you more,
I would agree.
I think it's the Packers.
Yeah.
All right, let's kind of go through our top 10s here. I have the Eagles 1.
Just don't let Michael Vick throw to Riley Cooper in the end zone at the end of that game.
Okay. I have the Eagles 1, Bills 2. You have a reversed. Bills 1, Eagles 2. Who's your third best team?
I got the Chiefs up to 3 now.
I still have the Lions at 3, and I understand you're looking at the injuries, and you have to. They just lost Alan McNeil. They lost David Montgomery. It's getting pretty bad up there.
Montgomery's out for the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so is McNeil.
Yeah.
The injuries on defense are a real problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing to see what they've gone through, and they're still playing tough. I think they're a team now that, they had a pretty good defense at one point. I think now they're going to have to be an elite offense all the time.
And they're capable of that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
certainly.
Goff is a guy that I probably don't give him enough credit. He's just really good. And I keep waiting for him to kind of come back down to earth. And he did have that 5 interception game. He's got 30 touchdowns, 10 picks, 110 passer rating. He's completing close to 70% of his passes. I mean, he's just really good. And
obviously the offense is perfect with him, especially when they're in that dome. Like it's a good offense in that dome. I don't know how well it would travel. I think that's kind of
I'm sorry, he's over 71% completion. Yeah, well, that's the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you said the other day they've only played 1 outdoor game. Is that true? Is that possible?
I don't think I said that. They might have, but
at Arizona, at Dallas, at Minnesota, at Green Bay, which they won 24-14, at Houston, at Indy. So Green Bay. So Lambeau's the only outdoor stadium they played in.
And they got it in early November.
They got it early November and scored 24 points, which is well below their average.
Now we'll see them this week in Chicago and then at San Francisco.
Stinks.
They stink, but it can still be cold.
It can still be cold.
We can still maybe get a read on that offense outside of a dome.
And they're at San Francisco after that. Could be windy.
Caleb Williams, man, like sometimes you watch him and everything is good until he throws the football.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Like sometimes it just looks he's avoiding tacklers, and sometimes it's a little too frenzied. He's just like happy feet. But man, sometimes it looks really good, and then he delivers the football, and it's like 20 yards over a guy's head.
He's got nothing around him. I think he could be a guy that in the right, he could be good.
I don't think he has nothing around him. He has some talent around him.
Yeah.
I think he needs better structure.
I think maybe that's a better way to put what I'm trying to say. A lot of former Eagles on that team. Saw Swift. You saw Kevin Byard.
Mm-hmm. TJ Edwards out there.
TJ Edwards is out there. Hey, Terrell Edmonds. I'm not sure is he still there? That might be it. But yeah, they won. They were actually 4-2. They beat the Jags, Panthers, Rams, and Titans. They beat the Rams. Gosh, they haven't won since October 13th.
Oh, you're thinking of Tremaine Edmonds, because I don't think Terrell was there, was he?
Yeah, maybe you're right. Yeah. That was a BS penalty on Kevin Byard. No, it wasn't. It was good.
Yeah, I was like, what are you talking about? He was definitely early.
Yeah.
So I have the Lions at 3. You have the Chiefs at 3. So I have the Chiefs at 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
and I think we both went Vikings 5.
I did. Yeah.
And Packers 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
So our differences are the top 2 and 3 and 4.
Yeah. Yeah, but and then so where do you go after Packers?
I went Ravens and then Steelers.
Same.
Who are your 9 and 10?
I was trying to think if I could work the Buccaneers in there because they're playing better, but they're still only 8 and 6.
Mm-hmm. I have 2 AFC teams.
I went Broncos 9.
Mm-hmm. I did too.
And I went Commanders.
I went Texans 10. I think Commanders were right there for me. They're close. I mean, They squeaked by in week 15.
Yeah.
Got real close at the end with the Saints.
I think the Eagles are going to kill them.
Oh, yeah?
I think it's going to be a double-digit game. Yeah, this stat, they're 0-4 against winning teams is kind of interesting. They're feisty. I mean, it's going to be different because I would think there'll be more Washington fans. Usually it's like 90, not 90%, but I think it's probably going to be a harder ticket because they're pretty good. But I don't think they're a great team.
I would assume no Zach. We'll get to the game later in the week. I assume no Zach Ertz. The concussion. Austin Eckler's still out. He burned the Eagles in that first game.
Yeah, catching the ball. Yeah, I think it's a game that the Eagles can really dominate. McLaurin and Jaden Daniels really have a nice connection going. Daniels has been good. I mean, he kind of had a lull there. I'm not sure he was totally healthy, but
I think he definitely wasn't healthy.
He's played.
And I think he even wasn't healthy when he played the Eagles the first time.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it didn't look like he was, but he's been fine. He's been good. They're going to have – it's interesting. I mean, the Giants might have the first pick. They might get Shador. There may be some interesting young quarterbacks in the division. See what the Cowboys do, but I assume they're going to keep Cooper Rush the way he's playing. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. But I did go Washington 10, and 10. And who's your 10?
Texans.
Yeah.
It's funny because when we started these power rankings, we probably did it like a month and a half ago. So
this is our fifth.
Halfway through the season.
Yeah.
At that point, I thought the best teams were in the AFC.
Right.
And since then, I think there's legitimate teams in the NFC, and the Eagles are at the top of that list.
Well, we both have 4 out of our top 6 are NFC teams.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at those 4, I mean, the Vikings are better than I thought they'd be. The Eagles are better. I mean, I think I picked the Eagles 10-7 this year. You went 11-6, right? I think.
I thought I picked 12. I could be wrong.
Yeah. I picked 14. That's right. But yeah, some of these teams are better than expected. But I think there's also like a real. I mean, I think the top 6 teams are just really good. Like, how many real legit Super Bowl contenders? Like, I'm not sure I put the Ravens and Steelers. Maybe the Ravens just because Lamar is so.
Yeah, I stand by the Ravens being better than the Steelers. I know the Steelers have beaten them. I think the Ravens are a more dangerous team, and it starts with the quarterback.
Yeah.
I think they have more ways to beat you.
He is something. He's got like 34 touchdowns and 3 picks. They play Sunday, right? In Baltimore, I believe.
They do.
Okay. It's a fun year, man. I love this stuff.
And in general, that's a good division. And the Eagles swept it.
Yeah, they did. There haven't been a lot of years where they swept the AFC.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean, there's talk like that AFC North is one of the best divisions in football, and the Eagles cruised through it.
And the funny thing is, they had to play 5 teams in AFC. I mean, they went 5-0 against the AFC,
mm-hmm.
which just because of the unbalanced schedule. But yeah, and those are all teams that, I mean, the Browns have a couple good wins. The Jaguars are kind of lost, but yeah, there's some really good AFC wins.
Yeah, but even like the Bengals to me is still a good win over a good offense
out there, and they won it by 20.
Mm-hmm.
And they
obviously the Ravens and Steelers games are 2 of their better wins on the season.
Yeah, good stuff.
How many? Like, how would you, aside from the power rankings, how would you rank the likelihood the team comes out of the AFC or NFC? So start with the AFC.
How likely
that team comes out of the conference?
What team?
Any particular team? Like, rank the teams in likelihood of coming out of the conference.
Well, AFC, I'd go Bills, then Chiefs.
Give me your 3. Who would be the third most likely?
Probably Ravens, just because of Lamar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now they might have to do it as a wild card.
Sure.
We'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
Makes it a little tougher.
Yeah. NFC, I'd go Eagles, Lions.
Would you still go Eagles over Lions, even knowing that the Eagles need help to get that one?
Yeah.
I would too.
I just can't see the Lions winning 2 games against playoff teams as banged up as they are. Just to get to the NFC Championship game, 3 games to get to New Orleans. So I'll go Eagles, Lions. I guess you got to go Vikings.
I would go Packers.
The Packers scare me.
Mm-hmm.
Packers scare me. Yeah, one or the other. Might go Packers.
Okay.
Yeah,
I would go Packers. But it's fun. It's a fun season, man. And we thought they'd be a pretty good team. We knew they had a good roster, but there were obviously a lot of questions entering the season with bringing Nick Sirianni back. You have 2 new coordinators. You have a bunch of new pieces, a lot of young players on defense. So we knew they had the talent, but to see it come together the way it has, and for us to be like talking about whether or not this is the best team in football after 15 weeks is really exciting.
And it's amazing. And I hope Eagles fans appreciate just like how many, this team just hasn't had many bad years where we're not doing this like in December, like looking at playoff pictures and tiebreakers and who do you want to play in the playoffs? I mean, I started doing this in '88, Dave, and the only year since then Eagles haven't been in the playoffs are '91 when they had the best defense ever and they were 10-6 and could have. 93, 94, then 97 through 99, then 05 when T.O. derailed everything, 07. Then Andy's last 2 years, 11 and 12. Then there was a lull, 14, 15, 16. Chip's last couple of years, Doug's first year, and then just 2020, the COVID year. I mean, this team's been in the playoffs since '88, like all but like 7 years.
It was funny. I was watching Monday Night Countdown on ESPN, and Jason Kelce was talking about the Bears and like how they just have to show that they belong in the NFL. They have to like play out the slate. And I'm thinking he didn't have to go through that very much in his career.
No.
A few years, but for the most part, like they were always in the hunt at least.
Yeah, I mean, his second year they were 4-2. Mm-hmm. That was I think he was hurt that year though, right? He missed most of 2012. Yeah. 20, Doug's last year, that was COVID. That was just a weird year, but yeah, that's true. I mean, there's guys on this team, you look at like, I don't know, like who was drafted in, I mean, since 17, I mean, they've been out of the playoffs 1 year. Yeah. So.
Yeah, like a Josh Sweat.
Yeah, Goddard. These guys have been in the playoffs just about every year. So, and, Jeff Lurie is the common denominator in all of this. Since he bought the team, I mean, they've missed the playoffs like 8 times. That's why he's a Hall of Fame owner, I believe. I think one more Super Bowl will lock that up. There hasn't been a lot of owners that have owned a team as long as him. There's been several, but the combination of that and getting to 3 Super Bowls, winning 1 so far, being in the playoffs every year. I mean, every coach he's hired has been, other than Chip, and even Chip was coach of the year his first year. But, I mean, he's nailed every coach. So, Eagles fans are lucky to have this franchise, this owner, and just another year. I mean, the last 3 years, they're 37-11. I mean, they just don't lose. So, fun times.
Yeah. You're right, though. Everyone should appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's rare.
It is.
All right, let's move on. Don't have a good transition here, but we talked to Nick Sirianni on Monday.
We'll be okay.
And he finally gave us some details about the little sideline thing with Jalen Carter. I don't think we made a big deal of it on the pod Sunday, but we did mention it, and I think it's good to follow up on it. Sirianni basically explained that he gave it to Jalen. It was, if you guys forgot about it, it was a bad personal foul on Jalen Carter. The Eagles lucked out that they ruled it to happen after the punt, so it basically became a 3-yard penalty. It backed them up from the 6 to the 3.
Instead of giving them a first down.
Exactly. That would have been a big deal. And then the Eagles burned the final 10 minutes and 29 seconds off the clock, but still a really dumb penalty in a moment where you can't have it. So Sirianni, apparently, he tells us on Monday, he's giving it to Jalen coming off the field. And then I guess he's stewing in it for a few minutes, and he goes back to give Jalen more. And at that point, Clint Hurtt steps in and says, hey, I got this. I've taken care of it. You've taken care of it. Leave it alone. Big Dom's involved to kind of separate them. I think it's just one of those things that happens, and it's like picked up on the cameras, and I think some people make a big deal of it, but it happens.
Probably happens in every game. It's not always. It probably doesn't always show up on TV, on TV copy, but you see this stuff, and the important thing is, and Nick was right to make it a point of emphasis right when it happens is when you have to do it.
Now, we might have been wrong for trying to go back for seconds.
Maybe. Clint Hurt was impressive. He's an impressive guy. He handled it. One of the few guys who kind of towers over Jalen Carter. And I thought they handled it fine.
Yeah. And then I think the camera did pick it up, but I told you too, I was able to watch her on the sideline a little bit later. It was, during that 10.5-minute drive, there was plenty of time to make up, and they did. Jalen Carter kind of sidled up next to Nick, and they talked briefly, hugged it out, and then that was that.
They didn't show that on TV.
I thought they did. I thought
if they did, I missed it.
Okay.
It's possible.
Yeah, it definitely happened. And Nick brought that up as well. You love to see the fire from Jalen Carter. I think that we've already seen a few moments this year where he's probably got a little too far, but I'd rather, I remember back in the New Orleans game, I listened to Chris Long talk about it, and he's like, you'd rather have to pull up on a guy than tell him to raise up his level.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing there.
Yeah.
But, and I think that's true. You'd rather have him play with this edge, and if every once in a while you got to say, hey, buddy, calm down a little bit. Don't go nuts here. Don't get in trouble. Don't get a penalty. I think you'd rather have that. And I like the edgy plays, but
I do too. I think you have to really, in a close game, in a big game, you just have to be smarter.
Sure.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Obviously I'm not saying to punch a guy in the helmet.
But if you're up 49-10, it's okay.
No, don't do it then either.
No, it is. I think you have to pick your spots, and
I am anti punching other players in the helmet. Rube is for it.
Well, sometimes it's called for, but he's just so good. Yeah, you don't want to take any of that aggressiveness away.
I shared that one clip with you. It was going around social media. If you haven't seen it, there's at one point where Broderick Jones is on the ground, who teammates with all these Georgia guys, and Jordan Davis is about to help him up. Jalen Carter comes over and slaps Jordan's hand away and says, no, we're not helping him up.
Yeah.
I like that. He has a little bit of that edge in him.
Yeah, I like that too.
Like Fletcher had a little bit of that edge. We saw Ndamukong Suh, not when he was here, he was kind of long in the tooth, but it's a good edge to have. It's just you have to make sure he's on the right side of it at all times.
And his teammates love that stuff. And maybe Jordan didn't at the moment, but I have no problem with that. When you're
a little nasty.
What did he say?
That was a chippy game.
We're not all Bulldogs. What did he say? We're not all Bulldogs. We're not Bulldogs anymore or something.
He didn't say that.
He didn't say that? Okay.
That was the caption on the video.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't listen to the audio, so I didn't know. But yeah, I love that stuff. And it was a chippy game. You're right. And sometimes you have to be extra careful in those kind of games because the refs are looking for that stuff.
Yeah, but in a chippy game, I kind of agree with him. Don't help him up.
I'm totally fine with that.
You exchange jerseys after the game, slap hands, whatever. But during the game, I'm fine with that. Even Slay, who is buddy with everyone, trying to fight people out there.
Yeah, good for him.
Still don't know how they didn't throw him out of the game.
I was like that. Just playing sports as a kid. If you had a friend on the other team, I wouldn't talk to him. I would high five him.
No.
Yeah, no.
I'm the other way.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
I'm overly talkative. I try to get in their heads a little bit with kindness.
All right. I remember playing softball. Did you work with Steve Wujcik at all at Burlington? The late Steve Wujcik, great guy. He was a really good athlete, and we were playing his team in softball. Hey, Rue, what's up? I ain't talking to you. I'll talk to you at work on Monday.
Really?
Yeah.
Beer league softball. You're giving cold shoulders.
Yeah.
Ruthless, man.
Yeah. It's all about being competitive. It's all about the dub.
Whenever Nick Sirianni talks about that stuff, all I can think about is he'd be a nightmare to have a board game night with.
Oh, God. That Scrabble board would be flying as soon as you got a 7-letter word.
Yeah.
Yeah. Forget it.
Nick's I got Connect again. How do you get all the N's and the C's? All right.
I'm a big Scrabble guy. I love Scrabble. My brother used to play in Scrabble tournaments in Atlantic City and stuff, and I'd go down. It was an interesting crowd at those Scrabble tournaments. Just a whole convention hall filled with brains. But yeah, I play myself. I play some Scrabble.
Were you about to say I play Scrabble by myself?
Well, I play on my phone sometimes.
Okay.
I find it relaxing. Like if I'm just sitting waiting for something, I play a little Scrabble.
Okay. That was about to be a really like sad moment. Just picturing you home alone playing Scrabble, like making a move and then going to the other side of the table, playing again.
Like when the Roadrunner plays tennis with himself.
Yeah. We mentioned Clint Hurt, but I think it's a good time to talk about some of the other position coaches on this team because, especially on defense, like Vic Fangio rightly gets a ton of credit, but his position coaches, at least from our perspective, it's tough to really know sometimes. I think they've all done a really good job.
Yeah, I think it's a really good group. And really the only time we really get to, during training camp, you kind of really see them at work. And once the season starts, like we're only at practice for stretch and for individual. And you can see a little bit, you see how involved they are. You can certainly tell like assistant coaches that are not maybe, I don't want to say unqualified, but maybe not elite coaches. You can tell sometimes, mainly in training camp, but I think this is a really good group. And I don't really see a weak link on this staff, and that's rare. And I think that goes for both sides of the ball. I mean, a guy like I think Aaron Moorhead's been really good. You look at the receivers, Jamel Singleton, I think the world of. I mean, he's going to have 3 Pro Bowl running backs in the last 3 years, 3 different guys. Has that ever happened with one position coach? I don't know. Yeah, they're impressive guys, and obviously Stout, goes without saying. But some of these other guys are kind of. Jason Michael's been here a long time. He's had good tight ends. I think it's a pretty good group, and I think 12-2 tells you what kind of group it is.
Yeah, and like it'd be really reductive to be like, oh, they're 12-2, their coaches must be doing a good job. But sometimes you do go off of that, and sometimes you go off of like seeing growth.
That's what you look for
from players. So like, let's go through them real quick. The DBs coaches this year, Christian Parker especially. I mean, they're getting high level play from really young players. I think that's pretty easy. Bobby King, the linebacker,
and Roy Anderson, works with the corners.
Roy Anderson, and then certainly Joe Casper,
who's back after a year in Miami,
safeties coach. So like that trifecta of coaches in the defensive back room, hard to argue with what they've done.
Everybody's gotten better. Every single guy's gotten better. Even like CJ. I think CJ, he doesn't have the picks as 2 years ago, but I think he's a better player.
And he's certainly improved throughout this season.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt about it. But the 2 rookies, you look at Isaiah, who's come in and played well. I mean, just right down the line. Really impressive stuff. But yeah, you mentioned Bobby King, who you asked Nick about.
Yeah.
Vic about. I'm sorry.
Vic. Yeah. I mean, Bobby King is a guy that he was clearly not their first choice. There were some bigger names out there that they were trying to hire as linebackers coach. And they ended up like Vic didn't even really know Bobby King. He was suggested to him and he by people he trusts, and he hired him. And gosh, I mean, that was the position we thought was the weak link on this team coming in. And Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean have been outstanding. Yeah.
I mean, it's the best linebacker play they've gotten from 2 guys since I don't know when. Yeah, he's, and we don't get to talk to these guys except on rare occasions, which is really unfortunate. I wish we could kind of be able to tell their stories, but yeah, Bobby King's been terrific.
And then up front, obviously they kept Jeremiah Washburn, who's I think done a really nice job with these edge players. A big concern right along there with linebacker. And then Clint Hurt.
And look at Nolan. Look at his growth. That's Wash has a big part in that.
Yeah. Jalix being a legit player in year 1.
Yeah.
They've dealt with the injuries. And then Clint Hurt inside. Jalen Carter's incredible. Moro Ojima's made a jump.
Milton's played a lot better than last year.
Yeah. You look for the growth. And I think all across the board on defense, they've gotten it.
Anybody on offense you want to single out?
Oh, you mentioned Singleton, Jamal Singleton, the running backs coach. He's been great. And I obviously did that big story earlier in the year. Saquon talking about how much Singleton's meant to him. It might sound easy. Like, of course, Saquon's going to be good, but to get the most out of a player who's already good can sometimes be hard because there's not as much juice to squeeze there.
Yeah, that's true. TJ Paganetti's still here, like his 17th year on the staff.
Assistant offensive line coach.
Yeah. Jamel actually is, I believe he's assistant head coach as well, right?
He is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good group. And the one guy I asked Kellen about today is Doug Nussmeier, who he was with the Cowboys and then for a year with the Chargers. It's his third team. They've been together. You don't really hear much about him, but he's Jalen's position coach, and Jalen's had a different position coach every year, which has got to be hard. But I think the way he's playing reflects really well on Doug. Kellen actually had a couple specifics. He said he's really good working on technique and just Jalen's footwork and that kind of stuff, it was interesting. You don't get a lot of specifics from Kellen. He kind of talks in generalities, but obviously whatever Doug Nussmeier is doing is working well.
Yeah. Position coaches, they don't get talked about enough.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a break. On the other side, we'll have some takeaways from the coordinators and then a bunch of questions from all you guys.
You deserve a car that thrills you, a car that puts goosebumps on your goosebumps. At Nissan, we've got everything from turbocharged SUVs to 100% electric vehicles that'll make your heart beat faster. Experience the thrill for yourself and shop your local Nissan store and nissanusa.com today.
All right, we're back on the Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan. He's Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. We talked to Vic Fangio, Kellen Moore, Michael Clay. Let's just go back and forth. A few quick thoughts from each of them. What stood out to you from Vic?
Vic's the best. I really like coordinator day. I really like coming down on Tuesdays and talking to these guys. It's a smaller media crowd. I think it was only like 10 or 12 of us there today. So you kind of you don't have to
In most cities, by the way, that would be like the biggest media day they've had in years.
That's true. There was a story about Mark Dalton. Do you know Mark? He's PR
Cardinals?
Guy. Yeah, he's head of Cardinals PR now, but he was he started here with the Eagles under Derek Boyko, and he got the Cards job in his very first press conference at the Cards facility in Tempe. That he had the coach there, whoever it was, Joe Bugle at the time or something. But he's like, they're like, "Are we going to start?" And he's like, "Well, let's wait for everyone to get here." And they're like, "This is everyone." There were 4 media people there. But anyway, I asked Vic about Slay. I've been really impressed with Slay and his ability to look. He's been banged up almost every week, and he just has that desire to go back in the game. He's played well coming back in, and I don't think he gets the credit for his toughness. I think he's become a more physical player. He
only had 1 tackle the other night. It was a really good form tackle.
Yeah, I think he's been better against the run. Like when he got here, I mean, he was not a good run defender, but he's become one. And he spoke highly of Slay and his ability to overcome just week after week of getting banged up. Not really serious injuries. Some have been. He's missed couple games, but to go into blue tent and then come out and go back on the field. He wants to be out there. And I think his teammates appreciate that. And that's leadership. That's really what leadership is.
Yeah. I asked Vic about the Reed Blankenship penalty.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. He said he didn't think it was a penalty. And I agree with him. It's a tricky situation because it is a penalty because they called it, but I don't think there's any coaching point. It was a late slide. Reed couldn't hold up and he hits the quarterback who's sliding, Justin Fields in this case. I don't know what else you're supposed to do there.
Yeah.
It's got to be frustrating for the player, for the coach, because you think you played it correctly and then you get a flag anyway. And Vic gave credit to the refs the week before for not calling a penalty on something that
on
CJ on a really beautiful form tackle. But this week, the refs made a mistake.
It's gotten to the point now where if there's a big hit, they just call a penalty. Like that's part of football. Imagine.
I think it's like it does have to be tough to legislate when the quarterback has these protections and he's allowed to slide. Any player's allowed to slide, I guess, but specifically quarterbacks, and they're looking for it. But when you start to slide that late, you can't magically stop your body from if you're already initiating a tackle.
Right, exactly. Reed was just laughing after the penalty, and they might not have scored a touchdown without that penalty.
Mm-hmm.
that was, I think it was,
And I'm not going to say that like the Eagles got screwed in that game, because I think they got some calls that definitely went their way.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. They probably got more than the Steelers, but it was not it was not a well officiated game. I think most of them this year have been. I loved what he said about Nolan Smith. He was asked a couple questions about Nolan. He said, and this is perfect Vic Fangio. He's like, well, he's improved every day since OTAs. And then he goes, well, not every day.
I like the rebellion against that stupid cliche.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, well, I remember that one day in October it got worse. But yeah, Nolan has improved so much. And he said, he's improved during the season, which you see. I thought Sunday was one of his best games.
He was a menace.
Yeah.
He was really good on Sunday. He had 4 of their 9 pressures in that game, had the sack, always plays the run really well.
Yeah.
And he's the guy now who's become their top snap getter for the last 4 weeks.
Snap getter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I probably didn't do the best job of framing the question to Vic about why he's that guy. I said, well, he's the next one.
Yeah.
But he's now leapfrogged Josh Sweat.
Yeah. And I think you pointed this out the other day. They're well aware of how Sweaty faded last year, and gotta make sure that doesn't happen again. Where, Nolan's 23. Sweat's still, I think, just 28, but that's a big difference. And I think there's a sense that Nolan can handle the additional snaps, and so far he has. I asked him about Nolan's physicality at his size, which is rare. You don't see that, and from guys his size. But he's a willing tackler. He's physical. Most of these edges who are like 240, they're not out there like playing the run. They just want the sacks, because sacks mean money. Nolan's an all around player. He's made a huge jump this year. Huge.
I agree. And there were real questions about that.
Sure.
I think there was maybe a little hand-wringing from some of the fan base about whether or not that was a good pick.
And even a month in the season, he hadn't really done much. But during the 10-game winning, he's got 5.5 sacks during this 10-game winning streak.
Anything else? Well, just a funny moment. Vic was asked about the 10-minute and 29-second drive, and he said he put his pom-poms on and kept rooting for first downs.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good stuff. There was a lot of others, and but that was the best stuff.
Okay. How about Kellen Moore?
Well, yeah, there wasn't a whole lot. Everybody in the organization speaks so highly of Kenny Gainwell, and he's become kind of a hot topic this week because he had a good game. He had a really good game Sunday.
Can I tell everyone what happened after our pod on Sunday?
Sure.
I asked your permission.
That's right.
To wr's a Kenny Gainwell story. Yeah. Guy's been here 4 years. I don't think I've gotten the right one yet.
Yeah, we each have our guys. We have our yeah. Who's the guy I never get to write about?
Probably CJ.
But
that's just
Morrow,
because
all the
that's not true. You
surviving
can write about
camp guys. I don't think I've written about him.
But you can.
Oh, thank you for your permission.
I think CJ just because.
Well, you guys bonded at the Super Bowl.
It's tough to sometimes approach CJ.
Yeah. I don't know who are my guys. Who's the guys that you would keep your distance from? Gainwell. One of the biggest ones of all time was Zach Ertz. Yeah.
When Zach left, I had to introduce myself to him.
Yeah, he was
not quite.
He was my guy. What else from Kellen? I asked him about the just being aggressive when they're backed up, which I think is really important. When you look at that 3rd and 7 on that at the start of that 10.5 minute drive, I think a lot of coaches just run into the line of scrimmage, get 3 yards, get the punter a little room and punt it. They threw that slant. They got 21 yards, I think it was, or 19 yards. And then the drive was on. I just think it's so important to stay aggressive. You got to really trust your quarterback, because an interception there is pretty much 7 points, minimum 3 points. And I like that about, Kellen's maybe not always that aggressive, but it was good to see in that situation.
I thought it was really cool the way he talked about that final drive, that they kind of ended up dealing with a bunch of different situations. I mean, it was almost a quarter of football.
Yeah.
So they start and they're in backed up. They're at the 3 yard line. So you have like plays for backed up. Then they hit a bunch of third downs during that drive. So you have your third down plays, and then they're getting there near midfield and there's like 4 or 5 minutes left. All of a sudden you're in your 4-minute offense. You're trying to burn clock. So kind of just a smorgasbord of situational football.
Interesting word. I don't know if I would have used it myself, but it probably fits. But yeah, that was good stuff.
I was trying to sneak it in there and I was proud of it. And then I started to say it and you gave me a look.
You weren't even halfway through the word. I was like, what?
And I think I didn't hit the smorgish hard enough on it.
Is it smorgish or smorgasbord?
I don't know.
Smorgasbord. What is a smorgasbord?
It's like a buffet, right?
Things.
It's like a buffet. No? Like you go to Lancaster, don't they have like the big buffets?
A lot of buffets.
Smorgasbord. They call them smorgasbords.
Yeah. They use a lot of those German type words out there.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come up?
A smorgasbord of situational football.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really interesting stuff. I hadn't looked at that drive that way, but
it's interesting from a play caller's perspective how it's all segmented.
Yeah, and they have their script for backed up. They have their script for third downs, which they had 5 of them that they converted 4 and then 1 on fourth down. And then they go into 4-minute. That was good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He talked about the passing offense in general, how they used empty in this game because they thought it would work. And like he's always very clear to say that. But he also talked about like how they'll work on some stuff some weeks and they don't work on it in other weeks. And sometimes you have to draw back on your experiences from a few weeks ago to get something out of a game.
Yeah, that was good. Anything from Michael Clay?
Not a ton. Bad pump by Brady Man. Just said he missed it.
Said you couldn't tell Jake Elliott during the week. It was just another week.
Yeah.
Obviously encouraging. But spoke highly of Tyler Brown.
And Joe P.
And Joe P.
Joe Panunzio, which one of my favorite side stories of the year is that a few of the photo services have labeled Vic Fangio as Joe Panunzio.
Yeah.
And there have been some media companies that have gotten by that. I've been making sure we haven't. Yeah.
Don't even look. I guess I could say
shorter.
The one that I see a lot
older
is
men.
People who think Kevin Patullo is Nick. In some photos, they look really similar. Mm-hmm. And I've seen photos of Patullo that are labeled as Nick Sirianni.
It was funny after the game on Sunday. I was leaving the locker room and I was going to the press conference because I knew Nick was in there already and Jalen was about to go after him. And I walk in the hallway and I think I see Nick. I'm like, oh, he must not even be in there yet. It was his brother Jay.
Oh, his brother looks like him.
A little bit. Yeah. At least for I saw the back of his head and his hairline. Like he looked like Nick. And I thought, oh, I can kind of relax. And then I realized it wasn't Nick. And then I hustled into the press conference.
Former track coach, Jay Sirianni.
Let's get to your questions if you have one for us. Eagle-Eye at NBCUni, NBCUni.com. QR code is on the screen. Let's get into it. First one from Owen. Hey, Dave and Rube, love the show. I'm a researcher for the NBC Sports Mothership in Connecticut. I write highlights for football night in America every Sunday and often get assigned to Eagles games as a fan. 2 quick questions. With a chance for a franchise record 15 wins, is this the best and or most talented Eagles team you have ever seen? If not, what is?
Pure roster. I mean, obviously, I didn't see the 48, 49 teams, 60 team, a lot of Hall of Famers on those teams. Just from what I've seen, I mean, the 04 team was really, really talented. And if the Patriots hadn't cheated, I think they would have had they lost that game by 3 points. 17, obviously. I think this roster, top to bottom, is probably better than 17. That team had kismet, that team was charmed.
Yeah. To me, before this year, the 22 team was the most talented team I've covered. Now you give 17 the credit for pulling out the W.
Yeah.
But I thought the 22 team position by position was more talented.
The thing about this, there's no weaknesses on this team. And they have decent depth at several positions. Their backups have played well. It's up there. It's certainly maybe that could be a story for after the season, ranked like the top 10 Eagles teams ever. But it's one of the most talented rosters I've seen.
Yeah. And if we're just looking at the pure talent, because obviously 17, they got it done.
Yeah. But imagine this team losing Jordan Mailata, losing Nakobe. I mean, the injuries that team overcame, it was remarkable. There was, losing Jalen, losing your starting quarterback. There was something special about that team.
And two was, can either of you remember anything like the drive that the Eagles closed out the game with on Sunday? The one I always think of is the Saints driving down and kicking a field goal to beat the Eagles in the 2014 wild card game. But even that was only 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a tough one. I think the offense left the field with the lead, right? And they never got back on the field. There's never been the NFL's been tracking drive info since 01. There's never been a 21 play and run out the clock drive. It's never happened till now. So I don't remember it because I don't think it's ever happened. Maybe before that, but I doubt it.
They've had other great drives in 4 minutes, but I mean, this was different.
And it was just different because they threw so much. Like usually when you think of these grind it out, run the ball, I think Saquon was 4 for 7 on the drive, and Gainwell had a couple okay runs, and Jalen had a couple, but 79 yards were passing, and you don't really get that in that kind of drive. So that made it unique for me.
Next question from John. Hey, Dave and Rube, do you guys believe there's a lack of respect for Nick Sirianni as a head coach when you see a defensive line coach arguing with him during the Steelers game?
Yeah, I don't think they were arguing. I think they were taking care of something that had to be taken care of, and I thought they handled it well. I do think around the country there's a lack of respect for Nick, and I mean, I try not to pay attention to some of these analysts who don't really know, haven't been here, maybe haven't visited Philadelphia in a long time, but it seems to think they're experts who call him a clown and say he doesn't do anything and he should have been fired. I mean, some of the stuff you hear, they never lose. And he's got a really important role on this team, and he might not be calling plays, but he's setting the culture. He's the guy that's communicating with the players. He's setting the practice schedule. I mean, he's running the team, and they haven't lost since September. And I do think there's a lack of respect. I think maybe people in this city are finally starting to buy in. They should. There's probably still some haters, but I mean, the body of work that he's put together, he's one of only 6 coaches in history to make the playoffs each of his first 4 years. It just doesn't happen. If they win Sunday in Washington, he'll move up from 5th to 4th in winning percentage by a coach. He'll pass, I think, George Allen, Hall of Famer. I think he's a really good coach, and I don't know what's going to take for people around the country to understand that it's a different kind of role. But I mean, he has a chance to go to the Super Bowl 2 out of his first 4 years. That doesn't happen. Yeah.
And as far as the initial question, I understand it, but sometimes that's the way sidelines are.
Yeah.
You get in the heat of a moment, you figure it out and you move on. I didn't take that as a lack of respect that a position coach was telling him, "Hey, I got this." You want that, actually.
He's the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if he didn't respect him, I don't buy that, but that's a fair question.
Mm-hmm. Next question is from Micah. Might be Micah Parsons?
Could be.
Okay. With as dominant as the Eagles are...
Do you know any good places to live in Philly? Thinking about moving.
With as dominant as the Eagles are throwing slants to A.J. Brown, when do they take advantage of corners trying to jump those routes with a slant and go? Is Kellen Moore setting up tendencies to break them in the playoffs? That's a callback to what Kellen Moore said before the season.
I love that quote.
Yep, possibly. The sluggo is there. And now I don't think even if teams are trying to time it up, I still think you can run it with AJ unless there's a linebacker kind of drops into that pocket there, into that window. I think the slant's always going to be there, but you can hit him with double.
Just keep hitting slants, and then critical moment, playoffs, go sluggo.
Mm-hmm. Eagles fan 56, is Bryce Huff going to be back, or is he done for the season?
Somebody asked Vic about Bryce Huff. I was under the impression he had to miss one more game. Is he eligible? Somebody said he was eligible to return. He has missed 4 games: Rams, Ravens, Panthers, Steelers. So they'd have to open his window, which we would probably hear about tomorrow. I don't know. I mean, we don't get injury updates, so it's hard to tell if he's close to being back, or they could certainly use him. I'm not sure he'd make a huge impact, but it'd be I
think he would end up being like a third down specialist.
Yeah.
Which isn't what you signed him for, but still useful.
Yeah, you might see him for 15 snaps.
Wouldn't that be a great story, though? Bryce Huff comes back and makes some kind of impact.
And, he was starting to play. Look, he wasn't a star, but he had 2.5 sacks, I think, in his last 5 games, 6 games. So he was starting to show up a little. I know he was feeling better about himself. His confidence seemed shot early in the year.
I haven't seen him.
I haven't seen him once. Yeah, I haven't seen him once. So, we'll ask Nick about him, I'm sure, on Wednesday, but he won't say anything. We won't know until they open his window.
And another question for Rube. How many round trips to the sports complex has he made on I-95?
Oh, my God. I don't even want to think about that.
You ever think about what stats you would want from your life?
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would the number be there?
Yeah. Well, let's do the math. How many times a year do you think, we come down here? I mean, because we're down here not a ton during the off season, but OTAs, draft, different pressers.
4 days a week during the season?
Well, really, yeah, 4. But I mean, for most of it, it's been 5.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even when I lived in Jersey, I was taking the Betsy over, so I'm going to count that. Where did I live when I started? I was living in Blackwood when I started, so I wasn't getting on 95 until
in Old City, but it was just called Philly then.
So let's say, when did I move to Bucks County? So it's probably been about. Let's do some math here. Let's see, what year is this?
Well, while you're doing the math, why don't I read the next question here? Does that work for you?
6,844.
Okay, that's good. That was quick math.
I just made that up, but it would be something over 6,000. That is terrifying. You know how much gas that is?
Yeah,
we'll do that stat.
Yeah. Next question from.
I like your theory. I like the concept of lifetime stats, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How many songs you've listened to? Yeah, that kind of stuff. Next question from Rick. Hi, guys. Rick from Fort Myers, Florida. Moved here 20 years ago and love your pod. So our edge guys have totally stepped up, and I love to see that. We definitely could use more out of the position, though. What are the odds that in the offseason we could try to get Hassan Reddick back? Some bad blood there, but he's all about the payday and has lost a ton this year. Could you imagine him on this team right now or next year? Wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much he has left. How many sacks does he have this year?
It just hasn't been a good year for him.
Yeah. He'll be 31 next year.
He has half a sack.
He has half a sack in 7 games. I just don't think they would go in that direction. That's not a Howie kind of move. I mean, he's descending. I'm not sure they believe he's a real good locker room guy. So I wouldn't expect that to happen.
Okay. It's a shame for him.
Yeah, and I like Hassan, but I mean, there's a reason when you've been on 4 teams in 5 years, and it'll be 5 and 6.
You don't think the Jets will have him back?
I don't.
I'm
curious what they're going to do with their quarterback, though. Do they want him back?
What a disaster.
Yeah.
Saw Joe Douglas. Did we mention that on the last pod?
No.
Joe Douglas was at the Eagles game on Sunday. What do you make of that?
Really? Maybe he had an interview with Howie.
I would bring him back in some kind of consultant role.
Yeah.
I know his tenure as GM didn't work out well in New York, obviously, but he's a good personnel guy.
Remember when we were in Manhattan Beach for the Eagles-Rams game, and we thought we saw him walking down the street?
Yeah, it was him.
Hey, Joe, were you in Manhattan Beach? Oh, yeah, that was.
There aren't a lot of guys walking around look like Joe Douglas.
That's fair.
I also saw Andy Weidel because he's the assistant GM in Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I ran into him.
Andy Weidel, good guy.
Yeah. Want to do one more?
Yeah, let's do one more.
Last one here from Matt. Hey, Dave and Rube. I'm a longtime listener living in Lexington, Kentucky, home of horses and bourbon. Love the pod. You guys keep me linked to my Eagles and to Philly. Love hearing Rube's music recommendations, Dave's national park stories, and really enjoy your banter. When TJ Watt went down Sunday while Lane was blocking him, Lane stood by an obvious concern. They had a monumental competition Sunday, 2 great players going at it. My question is about cross-team player relationships in your perspective. Do great players like Lane and TJ, who play one another, have off-field relationships, and how do they interact? Thanks, and keep up the great work.
That's an interesting question. In a lot of cases, they sure do. Lane's such a class act. He has so much respect for the really good players he goes up against. I don't know if they have a relationship. I don't know. I haven't heard that, but I'm sure he was concerned. He was talking about him after the game, how like that's the last thing you want to see. I mean, if you're Lane Johnson, like
I was able to actually tell Lane that TJ said he was okay.
Yeah.
Because I'd seen that come through.
Okay.
So he was like, actually, it was cool to see because Lane was like, oh, good.
Like if you're Lane Johnson, you're facing one of the best pass rushers like ever. And he's like maybe not disappointed that he left the game, but he just loves that competition so much. Lane measures himself by how he does against the best of all time.
And a few years ago, remember he went through that murderer's row.
Yeah.
It was like back to back to back to back weeks.
Yeah, it was like Gehrig, Ruth, DiMaggio, Yogi Berra. But yeah.
I love when you tell a joke and then it completely takes you out of the conversation.
Yeah, which is like everyone. But I think a lot of guys, I mean, like they do camps together, they work out together. Like we saw, Myles Garrett and Lane and Jordan at the joint practice in Berea, Ohio. How long were they talking? Half
and
an
then
hour?
Here too.
Yeah,
Browns came
that's
here.
right. It's just talking shop. I think all these guys feel like the more they can learn about the good guys they play against, the better they're going to be.
Yeah, especially if you're not playing them that year.
Exactly.
It's a little different when you got to face them.
Yeah.
But I think there's a little bit of that. I think for the most part, like it's been kind of relatively new in the last like 5-10 years. Players at position groups have really linked up. Like the tight ends have tight end U. Lane has been integral in the what do they call it? O-line masterminds. So I think like at position groups, that's become a bigger thing in recent years. Like cross-pollination, not so much, but you do see it. Like there's definitely like a level of respect with the top players in the
league.
You
hear about like receivers that work out with like top corners.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever can make you better. And like I can't think of a better way to improve than facing guys who are really good.
Yeah. If you have a question for us, it's eagleeye@nbcuni.com. QR code is on the screen for another second or so. This is where I tell you guys, if you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button, subscribe there as well. Any final words, Rube?
No, it's going to be a fun week. Eagles Commanders.
We'll dive into the matchup a little bit later. For Rube, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye, presented by Nissan.